Tommy and the Furgrilla by Stephen Horn. In a remote village, deep in the heart of the Lake District, lived Tommy Kendall, a small boy with a huge imagination who was about to have an adventure he would never forget, as long as he lived. Tommy was woken one Friday morning by the sound of his mother's shrieking voice. "Tommy, if you don't get out of bed right now, you'll be late for school." Tommy opened his eyes for a second, then closed them again and rolled over. "Tommy!" his mother yelled. "Get up! Have you forgotten it's your birthday?" Tommy sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes. "It's my birthday! Brilliant!" he screamed. He then jumped out of bed, pulling off his pyjamas, before skipping into the bathroom. "Happy birthday to me! Happy birthday to me!" he sang as he hurriedly washed his face. Throwing on his school uniform and still singing, Tommy ran down the stairs. "Where is it? Where is it, Mum?" he asked. "Where's what?" Tommy's mother replied, trying not to laugh. "You know, my present," said Tommy, hunting through the kitchen cupboards. "I hope I got what I wanted. A super deluxe zoom telescope." Tommy had dreamed of owning his very own telescope. He would stay up late at night staring out into space from his bedroom window, and when he finally drifted off to sleep, he would dream of far-off planets, aliens and rocket ships. "Go and have a look under the stairs," said Tommy's mother. "You never know what you might find." Tommy did, and there behind the vacuum cleaner was a long, thin box wrapped in Captain Jupiter paper. "It is! It is!" Tommy cried, tearing at the paper. Sure enough, written on the side of the box in large red letters were the words "Super Deluxe Zoom Telescope." "Yes, yes, yes!" shouted Tommy, running to his mother. "Thanks, Mum. You're the greatest." His mother smiled. "Come and have your breakfast now. You can play with your telescope tonight." Tommy ate his bowl of cornflakes with a huge smile on his face. Then, slipping his lunchbox into his rucksack, he kissed his mother goodbye and set off for school, still grinning from ear to ear. Now every day, on his way to school, Tommy would pretend he was Captain Jupiter, his favourite superhero, zapping aliens with his pencil case and saving the universe. "Take that, you spotty slime ball," he would shout. "Captain Jupiter to the rescue!" Tommy's first lesson of the day was maths. He hated maths. Boring maths with Mr. Morris, or Mangy Morris, as everyone called him, because of his thick black glasses and clothes which looked as though they were stolen from a scarecrow. Tommy always sat by the window, gazing out into the playground, wishing it was playtime. Mr. Morris waffled on about fractions and decimal points, but Tommy wasn't listening. He was daydreaming about building a rocket ship and flying off to a faraway galaxy where fractions had never been heard of. But his daydream was ruined when he imagined all the aliens looked like Mr. Morris. "Oh no!" he yelled out loud. "What is it, Kendall?" shouted Mr. Morris. "What's wrong with you, boy?" Nothing, sir," Tommy replied, sinking lower into his seat. Mr. Morris frowned. "Pay attention, Kendall," he bellowed. Tommy looked up at the blackboard and the jumble of figures written on it, but couldn't make any sense of them. Just then, out of the corner of his eye, Tommy saw something fall from the sky in a streak of blinding light, landing in one of the large steel dustbins in the corner of the playground. "Did you see that?" he yelled at the boy sitting beside him. What?" said Billy Tucker. "What is it?" "A rocket ship from Mars! Aliens! Green men with ray guns!" Tommy said excitedly. Billy laughed along with the rest of the class. "Your stories get more outrageous every time," he said, messing up Tommy's hair. "I saw it! Honest I did!" cried Tommy, brushing Billy's hand away. "We're under attack, I tell you!" Yeah. Go back to sleep, Space Cadet," Billy teased. A short while later, the playtime bell rang, and the entire class ran from their seats and charged at the door. "Walk, don't run," shouted Mr. Morris, but none of the children took any notice. They just ran from the class like a herd of stampeding elephants. Tommy was usually the last to leave, but on this day he was the first. He wanted to look inside the dustbin at the green spotty alien he was sure would be there. The dustbin was taller than Tommy, so he dragged a nearby bench to stand on. His heart was beating like a drum in his chest as he climbed up and peered sheepishly inside. There among the empty cans and crisp packets was a round metal object, no bigger than a basketball, which was glowing as if it were red hot. As Tommy looked closer, it began to make a buzzing sound. He jumped back. "Aliens!" he screamed as he ran across the playground towards a caretaker's office. "Help!" Mr. Potter had been the school caretaker for over 20 years, and it was well known that at that particular time of day he would always take a short nap. Tommy burst into his office, screaming hysterically, "Aliens! Help! Aliens!" Mr. Potter leapt from his seat, knocking his cup of coffee into the lap of his trousers. "What the devil!" he shouted. "Kendall, what do you want?" Tommy took a step back, because it was also well known that Mr. Potter had a foul temper and was feared by all the children. "There's an alien in the dustbin," said Tommy, "and a spaceship." Mr. Potter's forehead began to wrinkle, a sure sign he was about to lose his temper. "Kendall!" he screamed, "I'm fed up with your pathetic stories. One of these days your imagination is going to get you into deep trouble. Now get out of my office and don't come back." Tommy tried to explain. But Mr. Potter..." "Out!" Mr. Potter yelled. Tommy left the office as fast as he had entered, and after thinking for a moment, decided to go back to the dustbin in case he was really imagining it. But as he peered inside, again he saw the metal object was still there. It had stopped glowing, and to Tommy's amazement, there was what appeared to be a tiny door on one side, an open door. Just then, Tommy noticed that a pile of rubbish on one side of the dustbin was shaking. He plucked up all his courage and reached beneath the wrappers and empty tin cans, and felt what he thought might be a small cat. But as he pulled it out, his eyes nearly popped out of his head, because in his hand was what at first looked like a little red teddy bear with bright yellow hands, feet and ears, and a long, thin, black, wiry tail. Tommy thought the thing was a harmless, cuddly toy, until it began making a sort of growling sound. Tommy didn't know what to do. He was so shocked he just stood there open-mouthed until the creature sank its yellow teeth into Tommy's finger. "Ouch!" he shrieked. The creature was startled and immediately let go, licking its yellow lips. "Are you hungry?" Tommy asked. The creature growled again. Tommy took the creature behind the dustbin where the other children could not see him and sat down on the floor. "Wow! A real live alien!" he said, reaching into his rucksack and taking a bar of chocolate from his Captain Jupiter lunchbox. He offered it to the creature, who quickly grabbed it and forced the whole thing into its tiny mouth. "No, no," said Tommy. "You're supposed to take the wrapper off." But it was too late. The creature munched it up, making the most disgusting noise. It then smiled at Tommy. "Are you friendly?" Tommy asked the red creature. But it was startled by the noise the other children were making and dived into Tommy's rucksack. Just then the bell rang. Playtime was over. Tommy made his way back to class, thinking how great it would be to have a real live alien as a friend. Tommy was a loner. Most of the other children thought he was crazy and would tease him about his alien stories. His next lesson was geography with Miss Nosy Nelson. That was the nickname all the children gave her because of her enormous nose. Tommy sat at the back of the class, sliding his rucksack under his desk. During the lesson, the creature rummaged around amongst Tommy's books and PE equipment. It then came across Tommy's dictionary and sat at the bottom of the rucksack, flicking through the pages. What Tommy didn't know was that the creature could see in the dark and read any language at incredible speed. Tommy could hear mumbling coming from under his desk. The creature was actually learning to speak English using the dictionary. Miss Nelson began asking the class questions about the world. "OK, children, who can tell me the capital of America?" Suddenly the creature came across a particular word it liked the sound of and shouted, "Elephant!" "Don't be ridiculous, Tommy," Miss Nelson replied. Tommy looked at the other children, who were all laughing at him. I didn't say anything, miss," he said, turning red. Miss Nelson continued, "Right. What is the capital of France?" At that moment the creature shouted, "Knickers!" Everybody in the class roared with laughter. Everybody, that is, except Miss Nelson, who glared at Tommy. "What did you say, boy?" she yelled. Snickers, miss. I fancy a Snickers," Tommy replied quickly. "Well, you'll just have to wait till lunchtime," said Miss Nelson, who was beginning to lose her temper. "OK, class, what is the capital of Russia?" she asked. "And no silly answers, Tommy." The creature had just reached the letter N in the dictionary. "Nosy!" it shouted. "Kendall!" Miss Nelson roared. "See me after class." "But miss, Tommy tried to explain. "No buts, Kendall," said Miss Nelson, slamming the board rubber down on the desk, sending a cloud of chalk dust into the air, causing her to cough and splutter. When the next bell went, Tommy tried to sneak out of the class with the other children, but Miss Nelson saw him. "Where do you think you're going, Tommy Kendall?" she snapped. "I want 1,000 lines by Monday morning saying I must behave in class. Have you got that?" "Yes, miss," Tommy said, hanging his head in shame. The rest of the day was much the same. Every lesson Tommy attended, the creature would call out stupid words like Wally and idiot. By the end of the day, Tommy had 5,000 lines to do by Monday morning. "Oh no, how am I going to do all these?" he asked himself. After school, Tommy ran all the way home and went straight to his room, locking the door. He put his rucksack onto the bed and opened it. The creature was sitting in the bottom, covered in strawberry yoghurt that Tommy hadn't eaten at lunchtime. "Me like lobbit," it said. The creature had read so fast that some of the words it said came out wrong. "You can speak?" Tommy gasped. "Me speak?" the creature replied, and began saying some of the words it had read that day. "Jellyfish, ice cream, bottom." Tommy quickly put his hand over the creature's mouth. "Be quiet, or my mum's going to hear you," he whispered. The creature climbed out of the rucksack and sat on Tommy's pillow. "Solly," it said. "Me like you. What your name?" "My name's Tommy. What are you, and where did you come from?" replied Tommy, still amazed that he was speaking to a real alien. "Me Furgrilla, from planet Krell, in Novian Galaxy, 2,000,000 light years from your planet Urk," the tiny red creature replied. "You mean Earth?" Tommy said, chuckling to himself. "That what I said, Urk," replied the Furgrilla. "What are you doing here?" Tommy asked, wide-eyed. "Me on way to Pluto, but crash on Urk," the Furgrilla replied, as a tiny blue tear rolled down from his eye. "How will you get back home?" asked Tommy, wiping the tear away. The Furgrilla stood up and walked up and down Tommy's bed, shaking its head. "Me not know. Me must fix ship." "The ship? Oh no," said Tommy. "It's still in the bin. You wait here. I'll go back to school and get it." The Furgrilla reached out and took Tommy's hand. "You friend, Toddy," it said. "Actually, it's Tommy," Tommy said, correcting the tiny creature, who just smiled back at him. "That what I said, Toddy," it replied. "You'll have to be very quiet," Tommy told the Furgrilla. "If my mum comes up, just lie still. She'll think you're one of my toys." "Me not toy, me Furgrilla," the creature said angrily. "Just do as I say," said Tommy. "If my mum finds out I've got an alien in my room, she'll go ballistic." "OJ, Toddy," said the Furgrilla, sitting on Tommy's pillow again. "You mean okay?" Tommy said, correcting the creature again. "That what I said, stupid," the Furgrilla replied. "Right, I'm off," Tommy said, putting on his coat. "Remember, you have to be quiet." Tommy left the Furgrilla, went back downstairs, and after getting a black bin liner from the kitchen drawer, sneaked out of the house and ran back in the direction of the school. The Furgrilla, meanwhile, began to look around Tommy's room. It first opened Tommy's toy box. "Hello, me Furgrilla," it said when it saw the Action Man inside. But of course it did not answer. "Me Furgrilla, who you?" it said again. But still no answer. "OJ, you no talk me no talk you," the Furgrilla said, slamming down the lid. The Furgrilla then saw Tommy's Walkman on the bedside table. "What that?" it said, picking up the headphones and putting them around its waist. "Must be transporter machine to send Furgrilla home." It closed his eyes and pressed the play button. Suddenly the music started and the Furgrilla jumped into the air. "What this mad thing?" it shrieked, pressing all the buttons until the music stopped. The Furgrilla also pressed the eject button and its eyes lit up when the CD popped out. "Ooh, what this?" it said, picking it up and sniffing it. The Furgrilla then licked the CD. "Yuck, that not Nicobar," it said, looking closely at the writing on it. "Gaga," it said. "What Gaga?" The Furgrilla popped the CD back into the Walkman and began pressing all the buttons until the music started. "Who there?" the Furgrilla asked, looking around the room. It then put the headphones to one ear. "Who in there?" the Furgrilla asked, tapping the Walkman. "Oh no, Gaga trapped in machine." The alien creature began listening to the music and tried to sing along. cherry pie, pokey face, pokey face." The Furgrilla began hopping around on one foot, patting its bottom. cherry pie, pokey face, pokey face, pokey face, ma. Meanwhile, Tommy had reached the school. "Great," he said, climbing into the dustbin. "It's still there." Picking it up, he was amazed to find that it was as light as a feather and looked like two silver pudding bowls stuck together. Slipping it into the bin liner, Tommy climbed out of the dustbin. He was about to run home when he felt a firm hand on his shoulder. "Kendall, what are you doing here?" It was Mr. Potter. Tommy couldn't think of anything to say. "I asked you a question, Kendall," Mr. Potter roared. I'm collecting cans for recycling, sir," Tommy replied nervously. Mr. Potter leaned forward and yelled into Tommy's ear. "You have to ask my permission, boy. These are my bins, this is my playground, and this is my school. Do I make myself clear?" Tommy noticed the wrinkles on Mr. Potter's head. I've got to go now, sir," he said, breaking free from Mr. Potter's grip and running away. "I'm sorry, you can have your bin back now," he yelled cheekily. "I hope you'll both be very happy." Mr. Potter waved his fist in the air. "Don't be cheeky, Kendall. Just get out of my sight." Tommy threw the bin liner over his shoulder and ran home as fast as his legs could carry him. When he reached his house, he crept in as quiet as he could and tiptoed upstairs. As he got closer to his room, he could hear a mumbling sound. Tommy put an ear to the bedroom door. He could just make out the sound of the Furgrilla singing, "Ma ma ma ma, cherry pie, pokey face, pokey face, pokey face, ma 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 ma." Tommy chuckled to himself as he opened the door and peered in. The Furgrilla was still hopping around and patting its bottom. "What are you doing?" Tommy asked. "I thought I told you to be quiet." "This Krellian dance," the Furgrilla replied. "It's very funny," Tommy laughed. "Fuddy?" said the Furgrilla. "What do you mean, fuddy?" "No, funny," said Tommy. "That what I said, fuddy. Wally idiot," the Furgrilla snapped. "Me like Gaga." "You mean—" Tommy was about to correct the Furgrilla, but thought it safer not to. Tommy took the Furgrilla's spaceship from the bin liner. "I've got your ship. We can take it to my granddad's tomorrow. He can fix anything. Now, can I have a go at your Krellian dance?" "OJ Toddy," said the Furgrilla. Tommy took the CD from his Walkman and put it into his stereo. The two of them hopped around the room, slapping their bottoms. "This is fun!" cried Tommy. They hopped and slapped through the whole CD, and when it had finished, the pair fell exhausted onto Tommy's bed. Suddenly, Tommy's mother entered the room. The Furgrilla remembered what Tommy had told him and laid as still as it could on the bed. What's all that banging around? She asked. And what's that thing? She said, pointing to the Furgrilla. It's my new cuddly toy, Mum, explained Tommy. That's the ugliest thing I've ever seen, his mother said, screwing up her face. The Furgrilla growled. What's that noise? She asked. Oh, it's me, Mum, said Tommy, clearing his throat. I've got a bit of a cough. Your dinner will be ready soon, his mother said, leaving the room. It's your favourite, waffles. Waffy? What waffy? Asked the Furgrilla, licking its yellow lips. Potato waffles, said Tommy. They're delicious. Said the Furgrilla. Me want waffy. Tommy's mother called up the stairs. Tommy, your dinner's ready. Coming, Mum, said Tommy. You wait here, he told the Furgrilla, but the creature tried to follow him. Me want waffy, it said, rubbing its belly. Okay, I'll sneak you some up, Tommy said, putting the Furgrilla onto his bed. Just wait here, will you? He then left the room. Tommy sat at the kitchen table with a pile of waffles in front of him. When his mother's back was turned, he would slip one into his pocket. What's that noise? His mother asked. Noise? What noise? Said Tommy. He could hear the Furgrilla upstairs singing Pokey Face. Oh, that noise. That's just my TV, Mum. Tommy grabbed the last 2 waffles from his plate and ran upstairs before his mother could say any more. Finished, Mum, he said. It will be dark soon and I want to try out my new telescope. Okay, love, see you in the morning, she called after him. Oh, and happy birthday. Tommy rushed into his bedroom and closed the door behind him. Here's your waffles, he said, but the Furgrilla was nowhere to be seen. Where are you? He asked, looking around. It was then that he heard a thumping sound coming from inside his toy box. What's that? He said, lifting the lid. There inside, he saw the Furgrilla with the Action Man in a headlock. What on earth are you doing? Tommy asked. I taught this creature, but he's too rude to talk back, the Furgrilla replied. It's a toy, Tommy said, roaring with laughter. They don't talk. No talk? Dumbos, said the Furgrilla, giving Tommy's toy a Chinese burn. Come out of there. I've got you some waffles, Tommy said, lifting the Furgrilla from the toy box. And please be quiet. Tommy handed the waffles to the Furgrilla, and it shoved every piece into its mouth, munching and crunching and making the same disgusting noise as it did with the chocolate bar. Didn't your mother ever teach you any manners? Tommy chuckled. Mother? The Furgrilla said, walking to the window. It was dark, and the sky was full of stars. The Furgrilla began to cry floods of blue tears. Me must get home, Toddy, it sobbed. Don't worry, Tommy said, putting a hand on the creature's tiny shoulder. My granddad will fix your ship, and you'll be home in no time. By the way, you're almost as big as your ship. How do you get in? That Furgrilla magic, the creature said. Ship big as your house inside, when I make myself small. Tommy couldn't believe his ears. How do you do that? He asked. Me show, the Furgrilla said, putting one hand on its head and pushing down. Tommy looked on in amazement as the Furgrilla began to shrink before his very eyes. Wow, he gasped. That's brilliant. Soon the Furgrilla was no bigger than a mouse. It then ran to the ship, tapped 3 times on the side, and a door appeared. The Furgrilla ran inside and began banging and crashing. What are you doing? Tommy asked, peering inside. Got it, said the Furgrilla, emerging from the ship with what looked like a tiny TV remote in its hand. What's that? Tommy asked. This control panel for ship, explained the Furgrilla. It malfunctioned. Must be fixed. Don't worry, said Tommy. Now, can you make yourself big again before I tread on you? The Furgrilla looked up. How big you want? It asked. What do you mean, how big? Replied Tommy. Just how big can you make yourself? The Furgrilla grabbed a curly tuft of hair on the top of its head and pulled upwards. Tommy gasped as the Furgrilla began to grow taller and taller until its head was touching the ceiling. Wow, you're massive, he said, but you'd better stay smaller for the moment. It's easier to hide you that way. The Furgrilla agreed and pushed down until it was the size of one of Tommy's teddies. Let's try out my new telescope, Tommy said, pulling it from the box. After he had set it up, Tommy threw back the curtains and looked through the lens. Wow, you can see the stars as clear as anything, he gasped. Me look, the Furgrilla said, tugging at Tommy's arm. Look at those shooting stars, Tommy said, pointing up into the sky. The Furgrilla closed one eye and looked through the telescope. Me no see anything, it said. Try using the other eye, Tommy chuckled. Oh, said the Furgrilla, changing eyes. Them not shooting stars. Them Furgrillas on the way to Pluto. Me must join them soon, Toddy, the Furgrilla said. Tommy patted the Furgrilla on the back. It'll be okay, I promise you. You'll be there. He then remembered the lines he had to do for school and took out his books. What you do? Asked the Furgrilla, with its nose in Tommy's book. You got me in trouble today, so I have to do 5,000 lines by Monday morning, Tommy explained, as he began to write. The Furgrilla watched Tommy for a moment before saying, Me help? You? Tommy laughed. How can you help? The Furgrilla took the pen from Tommy and began to write. This easy, it said as it wrote faster and faster until Tommy felt dizzy watching. After only 2 minutes, the whole 5,000 lines were finished. Wow, said Tommy. That's amazing. Thanks. Tommy's mother called up the stairs. Go to sleep now, Tommy. It's gone 10 o'clock. Okay, Mum, Tommy called back. He then climbed into his astronaut pyjamas and hopped into bed. Come on, he said to the Furgrilla. You can sleep in here with me. The Furgrilla leapt in beside Tommy and snuggled up close. Good night, said Tommy, turning off his bedside lamp. What you say? Asked the Furgrilla. Oh, never mind. See you in the morning, Tommy replied, yawning. He then rolled over and drifted off to sleep with a huge smile on his face. The Furgrilla lay there for a while, staring out of the window, until eventually falling asleep too. On the other side of the village there lived a retired German scientist called Professor von Stink, but everybody called him von Stink because one of his experiments had gone wrong and exploded in front of him, covering the professor in a foul-smelling chemical. Ever since that day he had not been able to get rid of the ghastly smell, no matter how hard he scrubbed. It was because of this stench that the professor had no friends. Some people say he went mad living all on his own for so long, and they were right. Professor von Stink was as mad as a hatter. He was so lonely that one day he decided to build himself a robot so he would have someone to talk to. When he had almost finished, he looked around for something to use as a head, but all he could find was an old turnip. Oh, this will have to do, he said to himself. The professor then had to wait for a stormy night for his creation to be struck by lightning. This would hopefully bring it to life. When such a night came, von Stink carried the robot out into the garden and left it on the grass. He then ran back inside to watch from the window. The wind howled and the lightning flashed all around the robot. Suddenly there was a huge flash and an enormous bolt of lightning struck its turnip head. The robot's whole body lit up and began making strange noises. Ick, bog, zig. Then smoke poured from its turnip head and it let out a loud yow. Holding its head, it leapt up and ran towards the house. Oh no, said the professor. But before he had a chance to open the door, the robot crashed through it, knocking it off its hinges and flattening the professor. The robot ran straight upstairs and into the bathroom and plunged its smoking head down the toilet. Soon the whole house was filled with the stench of burnt turnip. Yuck, said the professor, climbing from under the door. What is that awful smell? Forgetting that he smelt like a sewer himself. The robot came out of the bathroom, slipped on the mat in the hall, and went tumbling down the stairs towards the professor. "Oh no! Oh no!" Von Stink cried, trying to get out of the way, but the robot flattened him once again. "Ah!" he screamed. "Get off me, you stupid machine!" The robot sat up and looked at the professor. "Daddy!" it said, throwing its arms around him, almost crushing his ribs. "It's not Daddy, you fool," the professor said, trying to break free. "It's Professor Von Stink to you. Now will you get off me?" As the professor wrestled with the robot, an alarm bell sounded in his laboratory deep underground. "That's my space scanner," Von Stink said, pushing the robot aside. He leapt to his feet and ran towards the cellar door. The robot followed closely behind, and before the professor had a chance to open the door, the robot crashed into him yet again. "You fool!" he screamed. "Oh, why did I give you a turnip for a head?" "Sorry, Fessor Stink," the robot replied, planting a sloppy kiss on the professor's head. "It's Stink, you crazy machine!" the professor growled, pushing the robot aside and disappearing downstairs. Inside his laboratory, his space scanning machine was flashing and buzzing loudly. "It's happened!" he shrieked. "It's finally happened! Something has finally landed on Earth from another planet!" The robot began fiddling with some of the professor's instruments, knocking a few of them over. "Will you leave things alone, you fool?" the professor shouted, turning on a large viewing screen and pressing the replay button. "There, look!" he said, watching the Furgrilla's ship crashing to Earth. "I must have that ship," he said. "Follow me." The robot stumbled behind him, knocking over more of the professor's equipment. "Careful, you fool!" the professor yelled. Followed closely by the clumsy robot, the professor made his way to his garage, where his prized black Rolls-Royce was kept. "Get in the back," Von Stink told the robot, who tried to open the door, but ripped it off its hinges. "No, no, no, my beautiful car!" cried the professor, with his hands in the air. "Sorry, Fessor Stink," replied the robot, trying to put the door back on. "Just get in, you fool!" barked the professor. "And how many times do I have to tell you? It's Stink, not Stink!" The robot climbed in, ripping the leather seats. "No, no," said the professor as they drove off. "Oops, sorry, Fessor Stink," the robot replied, hiding the rip. "It's Stink!" screamed the professor. "Stink! Stink! Stink!" Reaching Tommy's school, Von Stink and the robot saw that the gates had been locked. "Get out and open them," said the professor. The robot climbed out, tearing off the other door. The professor began pulling at his hair. "My car, my beautiful car! Look at it, it's ruined!" "Sorry, Fessor Stink," said the robot, hanging its turnip head. "Just open the gates, you fool!" snapped the professor, who by now was purple with rage. The robot walked to the school gates, held the lock and squeezed, crushing it in its powerful hand and tearing it from the gates. "At least you can do something right," Von Stink told the robot. "Why, thank you, Fessor Stink," the robot replied, pushing open the gates. "It's Stink! Stink! How many more times do I have to tell you?" cried the professor, driving through. "No need to tell me, Fessor Stink. I already know," said the robot, following behind. "Oh, never mind. Hurry up," Von Stink said, climbing from his battered car. "According to my scanner, the spaceship landed in that bin over there. Go and get it." The robot raised the huge bin above its head and emptied the contents onto the playground floor. "It's not here," the professor said, rummaging around in the rubbish. They then heard a voice behind them. "What do you think you're doing?" It was Mr. Potter. "And what's that dreadful smell?" "What smell?" replied the professor, who was used to his own stench by now. "We're looking for something, that's all. Now go away." "At this time of night?" Mr. Potter said angrily. "And how did you get in here? I'm calling the police." Mr. Potter turned to leave. "Grab him!" yelled the professor. The robot quickly took hold of Mr. Potter and held him upside down by one foot. "Let me go! Let me go! Do you know who I am?" the caretaker cried. "No, and I don't really care," replied the professor. "All I want is that spaceship." "Spaceship?" said Mr. Potter, his face as red as a pillar box. "You're as mad as that Kendall boy." Kendall? Who's Kendall? Asked the Professor, pricking up his ears. I'm not telling you. Now let me go or you'll be sorry, Mr. Potter said, struggling to break free. I wouldn't upset my robot if I were you, said the Professor. It's a bit clumsy, you see. It might accidentally drop you on your head. No, Mr. Potter pleaded. The boy's name's Tommy Kendall. He lives in Beechwood Avenue, number 42, I think. Thank you very much, the Professor said, grinning from ear to ear. He then signalled to the robot, who dropped Mr. Potter into the rubbish and placed the large steel dustbin over him. Help! Mr. Potter cried. Let me out! I don't like the dark! The Professor laughed as he and the robot made their way back to the car. Can I drive, Fessor Stink? The robot asked. No, you can't, the Professor replied. But it was too late. The robot tried to open the driver's door and tore it from his hinges. Von Stink sat on the floor and began to cry. My lovely car! Look at my lovely car! He sobbed. Look at what you've done, you mechanical moron! Sorry, Fessor Stink, said the robot. The Professor held his head in his hands. It stink! He screamed. I know, Fessor Stink, said the robot, who was about to climb behind the wheel. Oh, no, you don't, Von Stink said, leaping to his feet and pushing the robot in the back of the car. You have done enough damage. Now get in there, you fool. I've got plans to make. With this, he sped off home in what was left of his prized car. The next morning, Tommy was up and dressed by 7 o'clock, which was unusual for him, as it was Saturday, and he always stayed in bed until at least 10. His mother heard him moving around. Tommy, what are you doing up so early? She called from her bedroom. I'm going to see Grandad, Tommy replied, pulling back the sheets on his bed to wake the Furgrilla. But to his horror, the Furgrilla had gone. Oh, no! He cried, frantically searching the room. Where are you? Tommy then heard a faint mumbling sound that seemed to be coming from the bathroom along the hall. Furgrilla! He cried, rushing from his room, just as his mother came out of her room and headed for the bathroom. No! Cried Tommy, leaping in front of her and blocking the door. You can't go in there. Why, what's wrong? His mother asked. Tommy crossed his legs. I'm desperate to go, Mum, he said with a strained expression on his face. Well, you have to wait until I've finished in there, his mother said, reaching for the door handle. Tommy let out a painful moan, holding his belly. I'm bursting, Mum, he cried. Oh, all right, but be quick, his mother said angrily. Tommy rushed in the bathroom, bolting the door behind him, and looked around for the Furgrilla. He followed the mumbling sound, which seemed to be coming from the toilet. Tommy slowly raised the lid, and there, sitting in the bottom, was indeed the Furgrilla, scrubbing its back and singing, cherry pie, pokey face, ma, 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 ma. It looked up at Tommy and grinned. Hello, Toddy, it said, gargling with the toilet water. Me wash. Tommy burst out laughing. We don't wash in there, he said. We use the bath. The Furgrilla climbed out and shook itself like a dog, soaking Tommy and the floor. Tommy's mother then banged on the door. What are you doing in there? And who are you talking to? She asked. I'm talking to myself, Mum, Tommy replied, picking up the Furgrilla and wrapping it in a towel. It's about time, his mother said as Tommy opened the door, squeezed past her and rushed into his bedroom, kicking the door closed. Tommy's mother stepped into the bathroom and immediately slipped on the wet floor and landed straight in the bathtub. Tommy! She screamed. Tommy quickly dried the Furgrilla and put it and the control panel into his rucksack and ran downstairs. Grabbing a handful of biscuits and putting them also into his rucksack, Tommy went out into the garden to collect his bicycle. Tommy's granddad lived almost a mile away from his house, but it was all downhill, so Tommy had hardly any pedaling to do at all. He would just put his feet up and shout, "Whee!" as he rolled along the road. Grandad Jack, as Tommy called him, spent most of his time in his garden shed, tinkering with old television sets or anything else he could take to pieces. Tommy chained his bicycle to his granddad's fence and ran down the garden path. As he approached the shed, he heard a loud bang, which startled Tommy. "Are you all right, Grandad?" Tommy asked as the shed door opened and Grandad Jack appeared in a cloud of white smoke, coughing and spluttering. Yes, lad. Just a couple of wires crossed, that's all. Come on in. What can I do for you?" Tommy loved going into his granddad's shed because it was full of strange gadgets and unfinished inventions, like the crazy deck chair lawnmower made so that he could have 40 winks while he cut the grass. After all, he hated gardening. "Can you help me fix something, Grandad?" Tommy asked, taking the control panel from his rucksack. "What is it, lad?" Grandad Jack asked, looking it up and down. It's a control panel for my model boat," Tommy replied nervously. Grandad Jack put on his gold-rimmed spectacles. "Never seen anything like this before, lad. Let's have a look inside." He then prized it open with a screwdriver. "My word," he gasped. "This looks out of this world." "Can you fix it, Grandad Jack?" asked Tommy. "It's really important." "Looks like a burnt-out fuse," Grandad Jack mumbled, examining the control panel under a microscope. "But it's no fuse I've ever seen." "Oh, no," Tommy sighed, fearing the worst. Grandad Jack gave Tommy a reassuring hug. "Don't worry, lad," he said. "There's nothing your old Grandad can't fix, you know that." He then began rummaging around in a large box of electrical bits and bobs. Meanwhile, the Furgrilla had found the biscuits and began to munch them very noisily. It then let out an enormous burp. "What the devil was that?" gasped Grandad Jack, looking up. "Nothing, Grandad," Tommy replied, but as he spoke, the Furgrilla popped its head out of the rucksack. "My word!" Grandad Jack shrieked. "What is it?" Tommy had no choice but to tell his Grandad the whole story, and by the time he had finished, Grandad Jack's eyes and mouth were wide open. "That's amazing, lad," he said, scratching his head. "Well, can you fix the control panel, Grandad?" Tommy asked. "Leave it to me, lad," his Grandad replied, reaching into one of his many boxes. "Here, lad," he said, handing Tommy a walkie-talkie. "Take one of these. I'll call you when it's done." "Thanks, Grandad," Tommy said, picking up his rucksack. "You're the best." Grandad Jack gave Tommy a pat on the back. "Be careful, lad," he said. "There's a lot of people out there would love to get their hands on a real live alien." "I will, Grandad, and thanks," Tommy replied as he ran back along the garden path. "Where we go, Toddy?" the Furgrilla asked as they reached the bicycle. "I'll show you around the village, if I could just find the key to the padlock," Tommy said, delving into his pockets. But as he pulled out his spotted handkerchief, the key came with it and fell to the floor before bouncing down a nearby drain. "Oh, no," cried Tommy. "Now what am I going to do?" The Furgrilla climbed from the rucksack and stared at the padlock for a second. "Me do, Toddy," it said, putting the end of its long black tail into the padlock and wiggling it. To Tommy's amazement, the lock sprang open. "Wow!" he gasped. "That's terrific. Now get back in the bag before anyone sees you." The Furgrilla looked up at Tommy with a sad expression. "Furgrilla no like in there, Toddy," it said softly. "It dark." "Oh, all right," said Tommy, sitting the Furgrilla on the handlebars. "You can ride on here, but you must keep very still. Do you understand?" The Furgrilla nodded with a smile. Tommy began pedalling back up the steep hill. The Furgrilla was fascinated by everything that it saw and kept asking, "What that? What that?" To which Tommy would reply, "A postbox, a dog, a tree, a car." By this time, Tommy was getting hungry. "Do you like burgers?" he asked the Furgrilla, who replied, "Burgers? What burger?" "Hamburgers," said Tommy. "They're delicious with loads of ketchup." Said the Furgrilla. "Me think me like burger." It was hard work pedalling up the hill, and Tommy began to puff and pant. "My legs are killing me," he gasped. The Furgrilla looked up at Tommy and then down at the pedals and began to mumble something in a strange language. All of a sudden, Tommy felt something take over his bicycle. "What's happening?" he yelled. "Krellian magic," the Furgrilla replied, grinning. The bicycle began to go faster and faster. "Whee!" shrieked Tommy, taking his feet off the pedals. They flew past some of the children from Tommy's class, who stared in amazement. "Wow! How'd you do that?" one of them called out. "It's magic!" Tommy yelled back. "That's what it is!" On the other side of the village, Professor von Stink was busy working in his lab. "What are you doing, Professor Stink?" asked the robot. The professor glared at it. "It's stink! Stink! Stink!" he screamed. "How many more times have I got to tell you before it sinks into that foolish turnip head of yours?" "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me," the robot replied, skipping up and down. The professor put his head in his hands once again. "What have I done to deserve you?" he wailed. "Thank you, Professor Stink," the robot replied. It was far too dumb to realise what the professor was saying. Professor von Stink turned on a machine he had just finished building. "What is it, Professor?" asked the robot, fiddling with the buttons and dials. "Get away, you fool!" the professor barked, pushing the robot aside. "I've made an alien detector to track down our visitor from outer space." The robot scratched its turnip. "Oh, is your mother coming to stay, Professor Stink?" it asked. "No, you fool, I mean the alien." Von Stink growled. An alarm bell on the machine began to ring. "Yes, yes!" cried the professor, switching on the screen. "There, look! On the front of that bicycle!" The professor leapt up and down. "It can't be! It is! It's a Furgrilla!" These creatures were believed to have visited this planet centuries ago. "Do you know what this means?" The robot shook its turnip. "No, Fessor." The professor shook the robot. "This creature has powers you've never dreamed of," he said, getting overexcited. "What's a dream, Fessor?" the robot asked. The professor raised his eyebrows. Oh, why did I give you a turnip for a head? It's made you the most stupid robot in the world." "Thank you, Fessor Stink," the robot replied, hugging the professor tightly. "Get off me, you fool!" Von Stink yelled, pushing the robot away. "I must have that Furgrilla. Look, they're heading into town. Quickly, let's get after them." The professor and his bungling robot sped off after Tommy in his car, which by now had no doors at all. Meanwhile, Tommy had reached the high street, where he parked his bicycle outside the burger bar. "You'll have to get back inside the bag for now," he told the Furgrilla. "Okay, Toddy," the Furgrilla replied, hopping inside. Tommy pushed open the door of the burger bar and produced a crumpled £5 note from his pocket. "Can I help you, young man?" the man behind the counter asked. "Yes," said Tommy, looking up at the menu. "I'd like 2 burgers, please." Just then a voice from inside the rucksack said, "4 burger." The man looked puzzled. "Would you like 2 or 4 burgers, young man?" 2 burgers, please," Tommy said, shaking the rucksack to silence the Furgrilla. But the creature added, "4 burger." Tommy could see the man was getting cross. "We've got a right one here," he said to a lady working alongside him. Tommy peered into his rucksack. "Will you be quiet?" he told the Furgrilla. "He's talking to his bag now," the man laughed, handing Tommy 4 burgers. "That'll be £4.50, Looney Tunes." Tommy handed over the £5 note and was given change. "There you go. Now run along back to the loony bin before someone misses you." The man laughed hysterically. Tommy put the burgers into his bag and hurried out the door. "Let's get out of here," he said. "I know. We'll go to the park." As Tommy rode through the park gates, the professor and the robot were closing in on him. "There he is, Fessor!" the robot yelled. "Let's get him!" "Quiet, you fool!" the professor snapped. "We'll wait until the time is right." Tommy sat on a park bench and opened the rucksack, and as he did he heard a loud burp. "Oh no," he said, looking inside. The Furgrilla was sitting in the bottom, covered in mayonnaise. It had eaten all the burgers. "Me like burger," it said, licking its lips. "So do I," Tommy said angrily. Professor Von Stink climbed from his wrecked car. "Wait here," he told the robot, "and try not to break anything." He crept through the trees and bushes until he could see Tommy. The Furgrilla climbed from the bag and sat beside Tommy. "It is," said the professor quietly. "It really is." Just then a robin landed beside the bench and caught the Furgrilla's eye. The Furgrilla held out a yellow hand and began making a humming sound. The robin hopped onto the Furgrilla's hand. "Wow," said Tommy. "How'd you do that?" The Furgrilla was about to tell him when it noticed blood coming from the robin's wing. "Furgrilla fix," it said. Then to Tommy's amazement, the Furgrilla lifted a flap of fur on its belly and produced a bright red stone. "What's that?" Tommy asked. "This Krell stone," the Furgrilla replied. Then placing the stone over the robin's wing, the Furgrilla began making the humming sound again. The stone began to glow bright until it was so bright that Tommy had to look away. When he looked back, the robin's wing was completely healed. "That's amazing," Tommy said. "Where did you get that from?" The Furgrilla put the stone back under its fur and watched as the robin flew away. "Krellstone 10,000 of your years old," it explained. "It given Furgrilla when I born." Tommy couldn't believe his ears. "Do you mean you're 10,000 years old?" he asked, wide-eyed. "In this body," the Furgrilla replied. "I had many body before. That why I must get to Pluto. If I not change body soon, Furgrilla die." "Oh no," said Tommy. "How long have you got left?" The Furgrilla looked up into the sky. "When your moon in sky once more, I must change." A blue tear rolled down its cheek and fell to the floor. "Don't worry," said Tommy, putting an arm around the Furgrilla. "We'll get you there in time." "I must have that stone," said Von Stink as he crept closer. "What's that awful smell?" Tommy said, holding his nose. At that moment the professor leapt from the bushes, grabbing the Furgrilla. "Give me that stone," he yelled. "Give it to me. I must have it." Tommy jumped up. "Leave him alone," he shouted, but the professor pushed Tommy to the ground. "Go away, boy, if you know what's good for you," he snarled. Seeing this, the Furgrilla sank its yellow teeth into the professor's hand. "Yow!" Von Stink screamed, dropping the Furgrilla. "I'll get you," he said, picking up a large stick and waving it above his head. But before he could do anything, the Furgrilla tugged on the fur on its head and began to grow until it was at least 40 feet tall. The professor cowered at its feet. "Don't hurt me," he squealed. The Furgrilla bent down and grabbed the petrified professor by the scruff of the neck and hung him by his coat from the highest branch of a nearby oak tree, then pushed down on its head to shrink again. "You OJ, Choddy?" it asked. "Yes, thanks," Tommy replied, picking himself up. "But we'd better get out of here. That's Professor Von Stink. He's crazy." Tommy put the Furgrilla back into the rucksack and hopped onto his bicycle, pedalling away as fast as he could. "Help!" the professor screamed. "Somebody get me down!" But the branch he was hanging on began to split, and then crack! It broke. "Ah!" the professor cried as he fell from the tree into a large pile of horse manure the gardeners were about to put on the roses. "Come in, Grandad. It's me, Tommy. Grandad, come in," Tommy yelled into his walkie-talkie as he sped along. "Is that you, Tommy lad?" his Grandad replied. Yes, said Tommy, out of breath. "Professor Von Stink is after the Furgrilla. We must get the spaceship working right away." Grandad Jack rushed from his shed. "I've just fixed the control panel," he said. "I'll meet you at your house. Over and out." "Thanks, Grandad. Over and out," said Tommy. "Do you hear that?" he told the Furgrilla. "Everything's going to be okay." But there was no reply from the Furgrilla. Tommy stopped his bicycle and peered into his rucksack. "Are you okay?" he asked. The Furgrilla's body was shaking and beginning to turn from red to blue. "What's happening?" asked Tommy. "Must get to Pluto," the Furgrilla replied in a weak voice. "Must change." "Oh no," said Tommy, pedaling off as fast as he could. "Just hang on." Professor Von Stink climbed from the manure and squelched back to his car. "You smell nice," said the robot. "Shut up, you fool," the professor snapped. "Which way did they go?" "That way, Fessor," the robot said, pointing down the road. Von Stink started the car and roared after them. Tommy was almost home when the professor's car came up behind him. "Now I've got him! Ha ha!" the professor yelled with an evil grin, steering the car alongside Tommy. "Lean out the door and grab him," the professor told the robot. But because the robot was so dumb, it leaned out the wrong side just as the professor's car was passing a lamppost. There was a loud crunching sound, and the robot was thrown from the car. Its turnip head came off and rolled along the road, and there were nuts and bolts scattered everywhere. "No!" cried Professor Von Stink. But he was so busy looking behind him that he did not see a bend in the road ahead. His car crashed through a hedge and through the gates of a local pig farm. The professor was thrown from the car straight into the pen of a huge female pig, which immediately took a fancy to him and dragged Von Stink kicking and screaming into her shed. "Help me! Somebody help me! Help me!" he screamed. But his pitiful cries were drowned by the sound of the farmer's tractor. Tommy's brakes screeched as he skidded to a halt outside his house. His granddad's car was there already. "Grandad! Grandad!" Tommy cried as he burst through the door. "He's upstairs in your room," said Tommy's mother. "Now what's the rush?" "No time to explain, Mum," replied Tommy, sprinting upstairs and into his room. "Grandad, it's dying!" he yelled. "Calm down, lad," said Grandad Jack. "Now where's the ship?" Tommy pulled it from under his bed. "Incredible!" his granddad gasped. Tommy lifted the Furgrilla from his rucksack. His granddad looked puzzled. "It's far too big to fit in this tiny ship," he said, scratching his head. Tommy looked at the Furgrilla. "Quickly, make yourself small." The Furgrilla could hardly lift its hand. "Let me help you," Tommy said, pushing down on the Furgrilla's head. But nothing happened. "What's wrong? Why won't it work?" "It's too late, Toddy," the Furgrilla said faintly. No, it can't be," Tommy cried. Just then Tommy's mother called up the stairs. "Tommy, your waffles are ready." "That's it," Tommy said, flying down the stairs and grabbing a handful of waffles from his plate. "I'll have them in my room, Mum," he said, rushing back upstairs. But when Tommy entered his room, he could see the Furgrilla's eyes were closed. "I'm sorry, lad," his granddad said quietly. "I'm afraid it's too late." "No, please, no," Tommy cried. He broke off a small piece of waffle and put it into the Furgrilla's mouth. Come on, please," he said, but still nothing. A tear rolled down Tommy's face. There, lad, you did your best." Grandad Jack did his best to comfort Tommy. Tommy's heart sank at the thought of losing his one and only friend. But just then, Tommy saw the Furgrilla's mouth move, and then its eyes opened. Waffy," it said, munching loudly. "He's alive! He's alive!" Tommy shrieked. The Furgrilla snatched the rest of the waffles from Tommy's hand and scoffed them greedily. "You saved Furgrilla life," it said in between mouthfuls, and giving Tommy a long hug. "Hurry! You don't have much time," Grandad Jack said, handing Tommy the control panel. "You friend always, Toddy," the Furgrilla told Tommy, while pushing down on its head until it was able to walk inside its ship, holding the control panel. "I never forget you," it added from the doorway. "Quick, Tommy lad, open the window," said Grandad Jack. Tommy did so, just as the ship rose into the air. It hovered for a moment in front of Tommy's face, then shot out of the window and up into the night sky. "Do you think the Furgrilla will make it in time, Grandad?" Tommy asked. "I hope so, lad," Grandad Jack replied. "It's still pretty weak." Tommy's mother called up the stairs. "Time for bed now, Tommy, love. Say good night to your grandfather." Tommy hugged his granddad. "Good night, Grandad, and thanks for everything." "That's all right, lad. See you tomorrow," his granddad replied, turning off the light and leaving the room. Tommy couldn't sleep, wondering if the Furgrilla had made it to Pluto. But after a couple of hours, his eyelids became heavy and he began to drift off to sleep. No sooner was he asleep when he was woken by a tapping on the window. He jumped out of bed and threw open the curtains. There in front of him was the Furgrilla's ship hovering outside. Tommy opened the window and watched as the tiny spaceship glided inside. "You made it! You made it!" he gasped. The door of the ship opened and the Furgrilla stepped out onto the windowsill. Its fur was a brighter red than Tommy had ever seen. "You've got your new body! Great! Now you'll live another 10,000 years." The Furgrilla reached under its fur and pulled out what looked like a tiny whistle with strange markings on it. "You saved Furgrilla life, Toddy," it said, handing Tommy the whistle. "If you ever need Furgrilla, just blow." "Wow!" said Tommy. "You can hear this in space?" Tommy looked around his room for something to give the Furgrilla. "Here, take this," he said, handing the Furgrilla his Walkman. "Gaga," said the Furgrilla, grinning from ear to ear. "Thank you, Toddy." It turned and stepped back into its ship. "I wish I could go with you," said Tommy sadly. "Me take Toddy one day," replied the Furgrilla, waving goodbye from the doorway. As the tiny ship rose into a star-filled sky, Tommy could hear the Furgrilla faintly singing, cherry pie, pokey face, pokey face, pokey face, pokey face, ma. Tommy chuckled to himself as he climbed back into bed. He put the whistle under his pillow and settled down to sleep with a huge smile on his face, knowing he was the only boy to have a real live alien for a friend.